Hello, beloved survivors. We've got another treat for you today. We're sharing an episode from the podcast, Mother is a Question. This is an invitation into the depths of mothers' hearts, minds, and stories. Join best friends Julia Metzger-Traber and Tasha Haverty as they crack open definitions of motherhood and listen for the unspeakable through playful, intimate conversations with mothers from all walks of life. On this episode, they ask, what if humans could evolve into our most nurturing and creative selves? What if society were organized around care instead of extraction and destruction? What if we followed the leadership of those who mother? Well, Alexis Pauline Gumbs, self-proclaimed Black Feminist Love Evangelist and dear friend of How to Survive, thinks we have to. It's urgent. And she calls this possibility motherful. This episode, Alexis Pauline Gumbs will be our guide to a motherful world. Enjoy.
One night this winter, I was up late nursing my newborn, Zephyr. I couldn't go back to sleep, so I stupidly opened my phone and went down a rabbit hole of article after article about the wars and displacement and about mothers mourning their children in Gaza, and I lost it. I looked down at Zephyr's earnest, round face as he nursed, and I thought that thing that I don't usually let myself think. What world am I bringing my child into? But that night I reached for a book I keep by my bed. It's a book of poetry called Undrowned by Alexis Pauline Gumbs.
Are you still breathing? This is an offering towards our evolution, towards a possibility that instead of continuing the trajectory of slavery, entrapment, separation, and domination while making our atmosphere unbreathable, we might instead practice another way to breathe.
Another way to breathe. Another way for humans to coexist on Earth. Alexis has a word for this, a word she uses again and again, motherful. Eventually, Zephyr and I went back to sleep. Life continued, but I couldn't stop wondering, what would a motherful world look like? Is it really possible? So, I called my philosopher hero, Alexis Pauline Gumbs.
I'm so glad that you've decided to pour your energy into this question, because it is exactly the question that we must live into.
This is Mother is a Question. I'm Julia.
And I'm Tasha. Julia and I have been caring for each other with creativity and loyalty since we were 14.
Now we're raising tiny humans, mothering on the precipice of an unbreathable world.
And asking, what is a mother?
And all things answer.
Julesy, that story you told about that low moment nursing Zephyr, you know I have a lot of moments like that too. I guess in those moments of despair, I think about who I could call other than you, who would help me frame things differently or help me out of that darkness.
Yeah, I really need that right now.
So why do you think of all the people, Alexis is who you called as your lifeline?
Because I think she's brilliant, and I needed to hear that being a mother is not some small individualistic act, that there's someone out there who sees a lot of meaning in mothering as actually a creative and a political act. I needed to be invited beyond my little house to a place we can imagine and breathe life into, a motherful world. And Dr. Alexis Pauline Gumbs will be our guide there. She is a poet, a philosopher. She calls herself a Black Feminist Love Evangelist, a Black queer troublemaker, an aspirational cousin to all sentient beings. Alexis doesn't have any children. She's not a mother in the traditional sense, but she sees herself as a practitioner of mothering. She sees mothering as this: the practice of creating, nurturing, affirming, and supporting life. And how those practices could shape who we are as a society, how we treat each other, how we evolve as humans on this planet. It's something Alexis has been exploring in so many different ways. Alexis says her starting place was a motherful home.
I was a little baby who was born into a context of a whole bunch of adults who were so excited that I was born, who were pouring so much love into me. I have all these pictures now that I can see of it's just like my mom, all my aunties, my Nana, my grandmother, like they're just holding me and looking at me like, ah, like they're just like projecting all this love into my face. And each one of them just holding me, just like holding this tiny being. I mean, my mom talks about how she used to just talk to her belly before I was even born about the beautiful, loving impact whoever this person was going to have on the world.
And when her mom gave birth, she experienced a total transformation of her body, of her life, like most every mother experiences. But here's the thing, one of Alexis's big points: moms aren't the only ones who can be transformed by love. Alexis says her dad was motherful too. She has tons of pictures of her dad beaming at her little face and holding her tiny body too. Anything she was interested in, her dad was right there for it. Whether it was cartoons when she was a kid or books she was reading in grad school, he'd read, he'd learn, he'd dive in with full curiosity. She says he allowed his whole world to be changed by her.
That form of meeting me where I am and seeing me as someone who he's trying to care for as a parent, but also somebody who has something to teach him, right? I think that's actually what makes it a motherful relationship as opposed to a patriarchal property relationship with my dad, which I'm really grateful for. But then when I got to be of the age to be able to be witnessing these stories, the stories in the news, the narratives in the movies and in the TV shows, the rhetoric of the politicians, there was this huge dissonance. And I was like, well, how come they don't see the love that I see?
Alexis was born in 1982. After a time of progress, of the civil rights movement, Black Power, the women's movement, Alexis says she was born into an era of political backlashes against these movements. Not just in the US, also around the whole world, against anti-colonial revolutions.
All of those things are examples that say the world could be different. There could be a different way.
Conservative forces of capitalism, patriarchy, racism didn't want it a different way. And caught in the crossfires of these backlashes were mothers, specifically Black mothers, who were being demonized. She says it was a global phenomenon, part of population control, a story that says poor women and women of color should not give birth. In the US, President Reagan campaigned and won using the mythical image of the welfare queen to promote slashing social safety nets.
As if there really were so many people getting rich off of welfare, which never was true, right? But was very important for Ronald Reagan's platform of creating an antisocial economy. What you see in the political rhetoric boils down to the criminalization of Black mothers, the taking away of Black children from their mothers, the idea that there's such a thing as a quote unquote culture of poverty.
And this rhetoric shaped policy. Government solutions to the public health crises like poverty and addiction were, instead of investing in communities, to wage proverbial war on them.
We got to have a war on drugs. We got to have a war on poverty. It's really admitting all we know how to do is war.
And this is not an aberration in our society, Alexis says.
War itself is normative. It's happening all the time.
And so in the midst of all of this,
enter a little baby named Alexis Pauline Gumbs and a lot of other babies. Yeah.
So in her home and in her community, Alexis is living in a fiercely loving, motherful world. But elsewhere, she's hearing this rhetoric and seeing wars on Black families, on people like her. Something doesn't add up.
I'm pretty well positioned to recognize a lie that's being told about me and everyone I love repeatedly. And that honestly is my birth as a writer, because I started writing all these praise poems,
gushing about those people who loved her with all that motherful love. Her mother, her nana, her aunties, her dad. She said writing was a way to tell a different story than the one the media was telling. A story about how amazing these Black women are and how love is the most important thing.
And that because it's the most important thing, this is where we put our energy. And how can we grow that? And how can we support that? And could it be possible that love fills the whole space?
Could it be possible? Her writing opened her up to a whole world of stories and ideas.
I started reading all these things, texts that my parents put into my hands. It was like, oh, the mothering. Oh, okay, the mother-daughter things. Like these are primary themes that Black feminist writers keep coming back to.
Black feminist writers like Audre Lorde,
for those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon
Alice Walker,
but mothers and grandmothers, big sisters and aunts, to love and adore
June Jordan,
if I ever let love go, because the hatred
and Hortense Spillers.
The bonds of love that may or may not find successful translation beyond the context of kin.
And all through school, whatever I thought I was studying, at some point it came back to like, oh, it's mothering. Like this is about me wanting to understand my own mother and her mother and their relationship across space as a diasporic family, migrating from the Caribbean. But it's not what I first thought it was. I thought like, oh no, I just aesthetically love this. I just happen to always be reading books about this. I consider myself a relatively self-reflexive person, but I still think that we often don't know what we're doing and why we're drawn to what we're drawn to.
Alexis was drawn to something underneath those narratives. Love, the question of love, the possibility of love. The Black feminist tradition finally gave her the name for the kind of transformative love she had experienced and was inadvertently studying, seeking out.
This name, the name mother, the actions that could be understood as mothering and motherful, the life-giving actions that happen and must happen in a society are at the center of the Black feminist project. It offered a language of mothering and politicized mothering, because mothering is an instinct, yes, but it's also a practice. It can be taught. And this is part of the idea that, oh, everybody can participate in mothering, not just people who have given birth, not just people who are raising a specific set of people in their household, but it's actually something that, if it shaped our whole society, would place explicit priorities on what is the most life-giving choice, what is the most nourishing choice for the collective, what is it that sustains us for the long term.
When society shapes itself around that nourishing choice for the collective, Alexis says that's motherful. And this word, motherful, it's a Black feminist word, Alexis first heard through an organization called the Sisterhood of Black Single Mothers, based in Brooklyn. They coined the term in 1986 when Khadija Mateen said,
"Don't call our households fatherless households. Name what is here. We are motherful households," right? That was a political intervention that they used.
And making the word mother active, motherful, mothering, it's political, as opposed to something passive or even taken as a given, like motherhood. It's a reclamation. Because, as Alexis learned from her research, that word, motherhood, has a painful political history.
You could relate to motherhood as a status, right? It's a status that certain people have. How do you get motherhood? Well, you become a mother because of who you're raising, because you gave birth. It's a status that certain people are given, but it actually seems to show up more as a status that people are denied.
That status of motherhood was denied to people like her ancestors who were enslaved and reserved for white women, even as Black enslaved people were doing the mothering.
The labor of actually keeping the children alive was outsourced in non-consensual enslaved labor forms. And the status of mother was not something that gave safety or gave access to staying connection to enslaved people who mothered. The status of mother was what proved that the next generation could also be enslaved. So this idea of motherhood as a status becomes so complicated. And part of what complicates it is the fact that the actual work of mothering, the labor of keeping the people alive, is dispersed.
Enslaved people had to find ways to mother each other, regardless of biology, in order to survive. Mothering in these conditions, affirming life when survival seems impossible, when you're not meant to survive. Alexis says this was revolutionary, and continues to be. One day, about 15 years ago, Alexis was talking over Skype to her friend, poet and journalist Maya Williams. Maya was in Cairo working as a community organizer with ex-child soldiers, and she was sharing stories with Alexis about mothers she'd been working with there, and mothers in Israel and Palestine. The way the strength of their commitment to peace and justice just lit up the room. It was so powerful. And Alexis and Maya landed on this term, revolutionary mothering. So they turned to other mothers and collected essays into a book. They make a claim that they say should be obvious. In order to live well on this planet, to sustain and support our evolving species, to live in a society where people help create each other instead of destroy each other, we need to look at the practice of mothering. We need to look to the expertise of people who have dedicated their lives to raising children, to feeding communities. This is Alexis reading from her essay in the book.
The radical potential of the word mother comes after the M. It is the space that other takes up in our mouths when we say it. We are something else. We know it from how fearfully institutions wield social norms and try to shut us down. We know it from how we are transforming the planet with our every messy step toward making life possible. Mamas who unlearn domination by refusing to dominate their children, extended family and friends, community caregivers, radical childcare collectives, all of us breaking cycles of abuse by deciding what we want to replicate from the past and what we urgently need to transform. We are othering.
So you're making me think about this word revolutionary. So a lot of people, when they hear that, might be like, okay, wait, a revolution? That's like something where you overthrow a government. How is this revolutionary?
Yeah, it's a completely transformed relation. It does mean that everything could be different. There's a roundness, right? There's a roundness in revolve. And revolution. It makes you think about orbit. It makes you think about the roundness of being a planet, which is different than the linearity and the narrowness of a small definition of what it means to be alive that's about dominate or be dominated, right?
Alexis says it's also very concretely about mothers taking leadership to do what is needed for the collective.
Mothers who were indeed in the streets and did in fact take over government buildings and were fighting for the environment, for Afro-Indigenous sovereignty, for people to be able to be in community, to love each other, to sustain each other, but also for the rainforest and the mountains not to be extracted from by the corporations. They said, we say no war. We say you cannot bring your bulldozers here. This is where we draw the line.
And so, in this transformed world where the values of mothering would guide us, what would that world look like? Alexis says, imagine mothering filling every space, inspiring every interaction.
The verbs that I would associate with mothering include listening and holding and offering and receiving. They would include feeding or nourishing and watering. And they would include changing, transforming. I think the biggest mothering verb, of course, is loving. We can do that in relationship to each other. And it could be how we think about our relationship with the entire planet. Everybody's eating nourishing food. Our relationship to water is a relationship where the water quality increases because of our presence there. We are re-nourishing the soil that we're in relationship to with the food that we're growing is just getting like richer and more nutritious. The worms in there are super happy, like all of that. And what we're learning in an intergenerational way. Like we're really learning together to make this a more nourishing situation for all of us. The tiniest people who are not using spoken language yet, the elders who have seen a lot in their lives, all have something to offer. Like that's what we have the most to learn from. So I see a really rich possibility when I think about what would a motherful future be.
And it exists in the present. There are motherful realities all around us. We just need to live into them.
There's nobody who you can find who has no idea what mothering could possibly mean, right? There's an access point, because even if what they feel like they've experienced is an absence of mothering, they know what that was, that they needed, that they didn't get. Then now we, in our queer reclamation, can notice that, okay, but if mothering is something that anyone can do, what if we did it? What if everyone did that? The energy of mothering has to do with pouring into something, someone, a situation, a context without knowing what's going to emerge. It's a loving offering. And of course, we don't know, right? We don't know what's going to be created.
As we were getting ready to say goodbye, I was so energized with hope, but I also knew there'd be a moment soon when I'd be alone again, and this whole conversation would seem like a mirage. I knew I'd see another news story about Sudan or glaciers melting, and I'd crumble. So I asked Alexis for one last foothold. Are you really hopeful? Do you really believe that it is possible that we can reshape the world towards a more motherful future
Yes. One, we have to, right? So there's an urgency there, but also, yes, so I know that it's possible. Sometimes some people are like, you have more faith in people than they're really out here earning. But I think that's another part of the motherful approach. I don't think that my love for this planet is something to be earned. And my love for us as a collective and as a possible collective is not something that even falls completely in the range of what's predictable. It's a miraculous reality. I mean, maybe that's another way of describing a motherful approach, really opening ourselves to be present to the miracle and the possibility that actually life exceeds our expectations. Actually, love exceeds whatever we could imagine the experience of love would be. It does. And so that's where my faith comes from.
Jules, I'm thinking, could I treat the world like I treat my child? I'd like to think that I could. I just wonder how that would make its way to the people shaping policy decisions or controlling our military weapons supply.
Yeah, I mean, that's legit. But I think it's about this being a cultural shift, like a fundamentally different way for us to understand ourselves as co-inhabitants on this earth. So it requires a lot of us to believe it's possible and then to shift. I guess that's why she calls herself a love evangelist.
Right. And it's an act of faith, ultimately. And I think that's one of the things that I'm most going to take away from your conversation is how she articulates mothering as pouring your energy into something or someone or someplace without knowing what the outcome is going to be.
It's this huge risk. So much more vulnerable than seeking control or trying to dominate. But it's really powerful in its own way. And what if she's right? And there's more love than we could ever imagine. This episode of Mother is a Question was produced by me. I'm Julia Metzger-Traber.
And I'm Tasha Haverty. Our editor is Rob Rosenthal.
Listeners, we'd love to hear from you. It would be amazing if you were inspired to write a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. What's moved you? What do you like about the show? Help other listeners find us.
The rest of our team is Genevieve Sponsler, Sandra Lopez Monsalve, Emmanuel Desarme, and Courtney Florentine.
Mother is a Question's original music is by Rocky Sastry and Julia Reed. Other music from APM.
Mother is a Question is part of the Big Questions Project at PRX and supported by the John Templeton Foundation.